There's a new incentive to get more teachers in Illinois schools. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed legislation last week raising the minimum salary for teachers. However, there are some who have concerns about its implementation. Now, joining us this morning to talk more about that is Michael Jacoby. He's the executive director and CEO of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. And then Bridget Shanahan, she's the media relations director for the Illinois Education Association. Thanks so much for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having me. You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. Bridget, I'm going to start with you. The minimum salary for Illinois hasn't changed since 1980. You're saying now that it has, this is a good thing.
Yeah, this is a great thing for our teachers. We know that Illinoisans, based on a recent poll that the Illinois Education Association just did, the two words they most closely associate with our educators are underpaid and undervalued. So this isn't just about the salary. This is about respect for our educators, fixing the teacher shortage that we're in, and getting teachers back in our classrooms. I mean, if we want to talk about careers in the classroom, our young people are definitely considering the salaries they're going to be making when they're choosing their careers.
And Michael, you're actually critical of this new legislation. Why?
Well, I'm for teacher pay, and we want actually competitive pay for all teachers, but I'm concerned about the impact on some districts that don't have the resources to meet this standard. And matter of fact, I was part of the architect of our school funding formula here in Illinois, and 84% of these districts that are going to face the first benchmark, they're in Tier 1 and Tier 2 of our funding formula, and they're 70, 68% funded right now. Where's the resource going to come from for them to make that addition?
It's interesting that you would say that, because I did some research with the IEA, and there's actually only 3 school districts that people could be watching from right now in the suburban area that don't make $40,000 right now. And they're in the $37,000 to $38,000 range. Okay. And there's no way to know if they'll be at 40 before we get to this law's full implementation in 2023, because it's going to be implemented incrementally. So we have a little bit of time to get there. So, and we also know, based on that new funding formula, the evidence-based funding formula, they're getting more money too.
But to Michael's point, what about the more rural areas? Because we're talking about the whole state and not just Chicago and the Chicagoland area, where we tend to have our GDP looks a little bit different than the rest of the state. How would they be able to do that?
So there's only 7,700 teachers in Illinois who make less than 40K right now. And like Michael was talking about, the evidence-based funding formula gives money to our districts that are the poorest. So we know that in the past few years, since the evidence-based funding formula has been put in place, about $1 billion new dollars have gone to K-12 education, $375 million new dollars just this past year, which would be more than enough to help pay for this.
Well, Michael, do you think there's another way you can fix this teacher shortage or pay teachers more?
Exactly. So things that we advocated for when this bill was in the legislature were, one, some wage indexing, because the cost of living is not the same in western and southern Illinois as it is in the suburbs. This bill is a broad bill across the entire state. There's no wage indexing at all in that. The evidence-based formula actually is wage indexed. So districts that are in those rural areas are probably getting a little bit less resource than somebody in a suburban area because of the cost of living. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, we really wanted to see there be an opportunity for those Tier 1 and Tier 2 districts, the poorest districts in Illinois, to have some additional resources just targeted at this need. There are 50 districts that are going to have the first benchmark problem, $32,076 to meet that first benchmark. Those 50 districts, 84% of them are poorly funded. So we're going to have to figure out a way for them to actually resource their dollars into that versus expanding their programs and hiring new teachers. The evidence-based funding formula is about teachers. It's about programs, expansion, opportunities for adequate educational resources for kids. And the more you constrict that with one item like this, the less you can do the others.
And Bridget, what would be your response? Because I feel like many people want teachers to feel appreciated and to get funding and get the money that they certainly deserve. I think we can all agree with that. My mother is retired from Chicago Public Schools, so I get it. I'm also a property owner here in Chicago, and I feel like my taxes are high enough. What would you say to those people who are sitting at home and they're like, they don't want it to go up any higher?
This is not a tax increase, first of all. This is not a tax increase. increase. We're talking about the evidence-based funding formula that can help fund this for our school districts across the state. And we want our schools to succeed. We want our teachers to succeed, and we want public education to be viable in Illinois. And the fact is, we're in the middle of a teacher shortage crisis. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to continue to lose educators, and our students are going to lose. Our communities are going to suffer. So this is a first step in the right direction to fixing that teacher shortage. Will this fix everything? Absolutely not. This is about respect. I mean, you talked about the minimum wage, the previous minimum wage being set in 1980. We adjusted that for CPI, and that's how we came to the $40,000 figure. This isn't an arbitrary number that we pulled out of thin air. This is where those salaries should be right now.
Michael, any response to that?
So yeah, I mean, I agree. We should be having teacher pay as a very, very key focus. I think the teacher shortage is tied to that. But I like to have that be done locally, you know, in terms of local control. So now the legislature has just inserted itself into the collective bargaining process in these local communities. So take Farmington, for instance, 20% increase in their base teacher pay to meet the first benchmark, 50% increase in that base teacher pay to meet the $40,000 benchmark. They've already had a collective discussion at the local level and said, this is the salary that we want for our budget, for our community, and this is what we can afford. I think that's where the dialogue should be about teacher pay, and it should be increased.
All right, Michael, Bridget, I want to thank you both for sharing both of these sides here. Definitely an issue that I think a lot of people are passionate about. I mean, our kids matter, our teachers matter, and our schools matter. So thank you both for having the passion and the vigor and talking about this in a civil manner, too. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.